Hi everyone, welcome to your lesson on blood and later on blood vessels. Our title for the first part is blood. Our learning objective, describe and explain the function of the different parts of blood, and our keywords are red blood cell, white blood cell, platelets and plasma. You should have your notebook page open. I will go through the information that is in your notebook. If you also want to watch video clips about blood and blood vessels, then at this point in the lesson, pause this video, come out of it and go into your notebook and watch the video clip, which looks like the one included on this slide. If you're happy to just listen to the information and read, then you can stay with me now, or pause, watch the biology blood video and then come back. Okay, so firstly, let's look at the different types of cells that we find in our blood, starting with red blood cells. Red blood cells carry oxygen from the lungs to the cells. They're an unusual shape, biconcave disc, we call that shape. It's a bit like a donut, and that gives them a really large surface area for carrying oxygen. They don't have a nucleus, so they can't make more of themselves, but having no nucleus means there is more room in the cell for carrying oxygen. And they're red because of a pigment called hemoglobin. That's really important because it's the hemoglobin that oxygen attaches itself to, forming a substance called oxyhemoglobin, and it then gets carried around the body. Next then on to white blood cells. So our white blood cells are part of our immune system. They protect us against infectious diseases, and they do that in two ways. They either engulf or sort of absorb things like bacteria and viruses to get rid of them, or they produce substances known as antibodies. You might have heard lots of those in the coronavirus news articles and things, and also antitoxins. So those are chemicals that help destroy harmful things like bacteria and viruses. There are two types of white blood cell. The first one is called the phagocyte. They're the ones that do the engulfing, and that engulfing process is known as phagocytosis. So phagocytes carry out phagocytosis. And the other type, the ones that produce the antibodies and antitoxins, are known as lymphocytes. Okay, so now I've been through those, you may or may not have watched the video clip, but you have some written information on your notebook. You've had information from me. Please, in your notebook, have a go at answering these questions now. Pause the video while you do that, and then come back when you're ready for the answers. Number one, what's the function of red blood cells? Number two, what's the name of their shape and how does this support their function? Number three, why do they not contain a nucleus? Number four, what is the red pigment called and why is it needed? Number five, what is the function of white blood cells? Number six, explain what is meant by phagocytosis. Number seven, what do lymphocytes do? And number eight, what happens when your body has an infection? And now on to the answers. Number one, red blood cells carry oxygen from the lungs to the cells. Number two, they're known as a biconcave disc, and that gives greater surface area, that should say, for absorbing oxygen. Number three, more room to carry oxygen. Number four, hemoglobin, which binds to oxygen. Number five, defends against infectious disease. Number six, engulfing harmful microorganisms. Number seven, produces antibodies and or antitoxins. If you said either of those or both, that's fine. Number eight, the number of white blood cells in your blood increases. Okay, so we've talked about cells in blood, but there aren't just red and white blood cells in blood. we have some tiny little fragments called platelets. Okay, they are small fragments of old cells, so they're not live complete cells, but just small pieces of cells floating around in the blood. And they're important because they help the blood to clot. So when you cut or injure yourself, the platelets rush into the area where the injury is and start to clump together and help prevent you from bleeding. They also help stop microorganisms getting in. So when you cut or injure yourself, you've got an opening in your skin which could potentially let in infection. The platelets help sort of plug that hole and prevent harmful things like bacteria and viruses getting in through the wound. Lots of people think blood is red. Well, actually the liquid part of the blood is actually a pale straw coloured liquid. Okay, it looks red because of all the red blood cells. So this liquid carries the red blood cells, the white blood cells and the platelets. It's also what carries hormones around your body, glucose and amino acids. So they are substances produced when we digest our food. Plasma carries those around. Carbon dioxide and urea are waste products in animals, and our blood carries those around. And also it carries heat around our body, so it helps distribute heat evenly around bodies of animals. Okay, you've got some written information again in your notebook and some questions to answer, so please have a go at those now. Pause the video. I'll read them out if for those who need it, but then pause the video and answer them. So number 1, what are the function of platelets? Number 2, state one structural feature of platelets. Number 3, what happens if you have a lack of platelets in the blood? Number 4, list 6 components, that means parts, of plasma. Number 5, what nutrients are soluble products of digestion which are absorbed from the gut and taken to the cells of the body? And number 6, how does plasma support your body temperature? The answers to those are in the written information you've got in your notebook, so come back to check those when you're ready. And here are the answers. Number 1, help the blood to clot. Number 2, they're made of small fragments of cells. Number 3, what happens if you have a lack of platelets in the blood? Sorry, bruising and bleeding. I'm reading the question to you again. Number 4, red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets, liquids, glucose, amino acids, carbon dioxide, urea, or hormones. Any 6 of those is fine. Number 5, the soluble products of digestion are glucose and amino acids. And number 6, it distributes heat. Next, we've got some Hinge questions. So pause the video while you work out whether those are true or false. Number 1, red blood cells carry oxygen around the body. Number 2, white blood cells form clots to stop infection. Number 3, phagocytes produce antibodies to defend the body from infection. Number 4, plasma is a straw-coloured liquid. And number 5, lymphocytes are a type of red blood cell. And I'll give you the answers now. Number 1 is true. Number 2 is false. They do stop infection, but not by forming clots. Number 3, phagocytes produce antibodies is false. It's the lymphocytes that do that. Number 4, true. And number 5, false. They're a type of white blood cell. Hopefully you got most of those right. Now moving on to the second part of today's lesson, which is on blood vessels. So again, I'm going to go through all the information, but if you'd like to see a video about blood vessels, then pause this video and watch the video clip in your notebook, and then you can use the written information in the notebook to answer questions, or come back to this video for the answers. Okay then, let's go through the different types of blood vessels that are in our bodies. We'll start with arteries. These carry blood from the heart to the organs. They have very strong, thick, muscular walls because the blood being pumped through arteries is under really high pressure. And the walls are also quite elastic because as the blood sort of pumps through and stretches the arteries have to be able to return to their original shape. Capillaries next. So the arteries take the blood from the heart around the body, and then the arteries all over the body sort of branch off tiny, tiny little blood vessels called capillaries. And these capillaries are really, really small and spread throughout the body, and they're so small they actually go between the cells in our body. They carry the oxygenated blood and all the nutrients dissolved in the blood to the cells. And they also pick up waste products from the cells and they carry those waste products away. And you can see from the picture to the right of this slide that the the capillary walls are only 1 cell thick. They're very, very thin. And that's really important because it allows the useful products to diffuse through the walls from the capillary to the cells, and the waste products to diffuse from the cells into the capillary to be carried away. Next are veins. I've put just a large picture up because there's a bit more detail to note about veins here, as well as the shape of the vein. You should note that veins actually contain valves. We don't find valves in arteries or capillaries, just in veins, because veins are carrying blood back sort of upwards towards the heart, and so there's a risk of backflow. There's a risk of the blood wanting to flow in the wrong direction, and valves help prevent that backflow. So our capillaries then join back up to form veins. So arteries branch to become capillaries, and then the capillaries sort of join back together to form our venous system, our veins. They have much thinner walls than arteries because the blood is at much lower pressure. They've got a large lumen, so that the lumen is the term we use for the sort of the volume inside the blood vessel, and veins have a large lumen so that even though the blood is not under high pressure, it can flow easily. And we mentioned before the valves to prevent backflow. So you've now got 2 sets of questions to answer. I'll read those through. You can scroll past this if you don't need that. Number 1, what's the difference between arteries, capillaries and veins? Number 2, why are the artery walls strong and elastic? Number 3, what is the hole in the middle called and how does the artery wall compare? Number 4, describe the layers of the artery wall. And then in the second set, number 1, describe the structure of capillaries. Number 2, why do they have permeable walls? Number 3, why are their walls only 1 cell thick? Number 4, what is the function of veins? Number 5, how do the walls compare to those in arteries? And number 6, why do they contain valves? Pause the video now and then I will give you the answers. So the answers then to the first set of questions. Number 1, arteries take blood away from the heart and they have thick muscular walls. Capillaries are tiny branches of arteries and their walls are 1 cell thick. Veins are when the capillaries join back together. They have thin walls and a large lumen. Okay, so as long as you've got at least one of those points for each of those, you've done fine. Question 2, because the blood is at very high pressure. Question 3, we call it a lumen, and the artery wall is thick compared to the size of its lumen. Number 5, we've got a thin endothelium in the centre, a thick muscle layer, and a tough outer wall, and you might also have said that the artery wall contains elastic fibres. The second set of questions. Capillaries are really, really tiny. They're branched from arteries. There are extensive networks of them, and they've got permeable walls, so you may have said any of those things. Number two, the walls are permeable so that substances can diffuse in and out. Number three, this decreases the diffusion distance. Number four, the veins take blood back to the heart. Number five, they are thinner. And number six, the valves keep blood flowing in the right direction or prevent backflow. Okay, next there is a higher question for those of you who want to continue to the higher. There is an exam question for you to have a go at, so give yourself a few minutes to do that, pause the video, and then I will show you the mark scheme for that question. If you are finishing here, don't forget to hand in your work, and well done. So the higher question, the diagrams show cross sections of an artery and a vein. Compare the structure of arteries and veins and explain how they are related to their functions in the circulation of blood in the human body. So first of all, let's think about the command word in the question. It is compare. When we're comparing things, we're looking at the differences between them. Okay. It's a 6-mark question, so that would, and we're just looking at arteries and veins, not capillaries. So we want to try and come up with maybe 3 points for each. And we're looking at the structure, but also explaining how it relates to the function. So give that a go and then come back for the mark scheme. Okay, so these are the sorts of things we would have expected to see in your answer. Arteries have thick muscular walls, that would give you a mark. A small lumen for a second mark, and we've got to relate that to function, so we would say that that enables them to carry blood at high pressure for another mark. Veins, we would say they have a thinner wall. You might also have said they have a large lumen, and they carry blood at lower pressure. Also, you'd get a mark if you said valves prevent backflow. You would only get a full 6 marks for this question if you included the veins carrying blood at lower pressure, and that's because the question specifically asks you to explain the purpose of or the reasons for the structure. So that's all for today's lesson. Well done. Don't forget to turn your work in if you've finished, and don't forget to ask your teacher for help if there's anything you're stuck on. Thanks.